Tansei, I'm Snuneymuxw. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The province of British Columbia says more than 700 hectares of land on Mount Benson North has been returned to the Snuneymuxw First Nation near Nanaimo, BC on Vancouver Island. The announcement stems from a 2020 agreement between the First Nation and the province. The First Nation's Petroglyph Development Group is the economic arm of the First Nation. It will now oversee the holding and managing of the land. Snuneymuxw Chief Mike Wise calls the land back a good first step in putting more responsibility over their lands, but he says more than 2,000 more hectares have yet to be returned by the province. In 2024, more than 210 hectares of land on Mount Benson was previously returned to the First Nation by BC. The province calls the land back transfer as another act of reconciliation. Saskatchewan RCMP are now providing more details regarding the dangerous persons alert in the Muskowekwan First Nation area. During the early morning hours of Thursday at around 2 a.m., Punashai RCMP responded to a report of an armed man in a home in Muskowekwan. When Mounties arrived, a firearm was discharged and an officer was struck. The officer was taken to hospital by EMS with injuries described as non-life-threatening. The armed individual then fled from the home on foot. At 6:36 a.m., RCMP issued a dangerous person alert for Muskowekwan and the surrounding area. RCMP later found the man near the town of Lestock and arrested him at around 8:50 a.m. The dangerous person alert was then cancelled just after at around 9:11 a.m. Charges have not been laid at this time and the investigation continues. RCMP are also asking anyone with information about the incident to call RCMP or Crime Stoppers. The United States Department of Homeland Security recently shared a controversial post on Instagram this week, with some online calling it anti-Native propaganda. In this Instagram post by Homeland Security, this painting titled American Progress by artist John Gast is shared, followed by a few words that reads, "A heritage to be proud of, a homeland worth defending." The 1872 painting depicts what is called manifest destiny, the past belief that white settlers were divinely entitled to expand westward across North America. An angelic figure can be seen in the center of the painting, leading the settlers, while Native American people and the buffalo can be seen being pushed into the darkness. The post is shared at a time when the U.S. continues to conduct sweeping immigration raids by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Members of the Navajo Nation have been previously misprofiled during ICE raids last January. 3 workers who were trapped in a remote northern British Columbia mine have been rescued after more than 60 hours underground. The operator of the Red Chris mine says the 3 men were safely brought to the surface late last night. They were trapped underground by 2 rock falls Tuesday morning. All 3 men were huddled in a refuge chamber where they had access to food, water, and air. The rescue operation involved drones and a remote-controlled scoop that cleared away the rockfall. Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Inuit leaders in the Northwest Territories on Thursday to discuss the controversial Bill C-5, also known as the One Canadian Economy Act. Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Nathan Obid says he was reassured the law will not violate modern treaties. APTN Sav Jones has more.
Inuit leaders had a lot to discuss during a meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney early Thursday. Along with the One Canadian Economy Act, or Bill C-5, the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee has identified 14 priority areas they want to work on with Canada.
Whether it be the Child First Initiative, the ongoing housing crisis, and the necessary actions to resolve it, the work that still needs to be done on education and on language and infrastructure. All of these things I hope we can have fulsome conversations about today.
Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami President Nathan Obed co-chaired the meeting, saying having it so soon after the federal election shows the government's willingness to work with Inuit. Going in with a third of his cabinet to discuss Bill C-5, Carney said it was a charged agenda.
This opportunity to build major projects, nation-building projects across Inuit Nunagat, across the Northwest Territories, across Canada, in partnership. So that will be the core of our discussions today, but as well we'll address issues around Arctic security, defense, and education, health, social services for our people.
C5 has been widely controversial throughout Canada, with fears that it threatens Indigenous sovereignty. But after the meeting, Obed said he felt reassured the bill will not violate modern treaties.
I'm really optimistic about the ability for Canada to respect our agreements in this implementation phase of Bill C5. But still, these are early days, and we look forward to the conversations ahead.
Northern and Arctic Affairs Minister Rebecca Chartrand shared what was said to calm Obed's fears.
What we told Natan Obed is that these processes have already been established. So when we look at the modern treaties, we know that we have to abide by the regulatory and the environmental assessments, and that's what we're going to do.
Virginia Mearns, an Inuk from Nunavut, was also announced as the new Arctic ambassador. Obed said he personally recommended her for the role and is very pleased with her appointment. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And stay tuned for Dennis Ward's one-on-one interview with Prime Minister Mark Carney later in the show. As the United States continues to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico, a First Nation in southern Saskatchewan is working to protect Indigenous trade. APTN video journalist Rachel May spoke with a Chief Roger Redmond before his trip to Mexico to promote an Indigenous trade model.
We're exercising our sovereignty and implementing it and operationalizing it through mechanisms that we've always had as Dakota people, as Indian people.
Standing Buffalo Dakota Nation Chief Roger Redmond is in Mexico to announce the Standing Buffalo Economic Corridor Initiative. He is at the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, or CEC, to seek recognition from world leaders to move his initiative forward. The CEC is hosting a public forum in Mexico City from July 24th to 25th. The CEC brings together Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. to address environmental issues and avoid conflict between trade and environmental policies.
Operationalizing using existing legislation, international legislation, on incorporating and revitalizing ancient trade routes.
The initiative is a First Nations-led plan to promote trade, protect the environment, and build infrastructure through partnerships with Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. It will reconnect the historic Oceti-Sakowee trade network that once linked the Mississippi Basin to the Canadian Rockies. It also includes creating the Dakota-Lakota Cross-Border Trade Authority to issue licenses, verify goods, and network with all governments.
So we have mechanisms in place on how everybody would collectively benefit from that. So we've given the province notice, we've given some of the industry players notice that we have our own consultation framework and our own legislative authority stemming from our traditional governance systems. And the trade route is one of them.
Chief Redmond says a Sovereign Alliance consultation will set legal rules for project approvals, cultural reviews, and monitoring. The nation presented the Economic Corridor Initiative to Canadian Environment Minister Julie DeBrusin, U.S. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, and Mexico's Environment Secretary Alicia Barcena. Redmond says the initiative is made in good faith, stressing that First Nations-led environmental law is key to North America's future in climate, conservation, and trade.
We work together, we stick together, we're stronger. So when one nation succeeds, we all succeed.
Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation with us. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. And to read and watch our stories, go to www.aptnnews.ca. And you can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A new junior Canadian Ranger program has recently been established in Whitehorse. That story when we come back. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The First Nations Pavilion has withdrawn from Winnipeg's Focaama Festival to focus on helping wildfire evacuees. The annual festival showcases over 40 different ethno-cultural communities in Manitoba through entertainment and cuisine. Buffy Handel is the executive director of the First Nations Pavilion's sponsoring organization, Snuneymuxw Inc. She said they value their relationship with Focaama and the opportunity to share Indigenous culture. However, they're shifting their focus to support evacuees, stating, quote, "It is essential that space, safety, and extra care be given to those most affected." Focaama Executive Director Teresa Cotronillo said they're disappointed but stand by Snuneymuxw's decision. The Brazilian pavilion also moved its dates and location to accommodate for an emergency shelter for evacuees. APTN News reached out to Handel and Focaama but did not hear back by airtime. A new Junior Canadian Rangers patrol in Whitehorse is launching in the coming months. The Junior Canadian Rangers program is aimed at youth aged 12 to 18 in communities across the territories in northern BC. The program helps youth learn on-the-land ranger skills as well as life skills. The new patrol in Whitehorse will serve as a hub for junior rangers there and in the Yukon's rural communities. The patrol's master corporal says the program will teach junior rangers things like how to travel on the land, equipment maintenance, and leadership skills.
One of the great things about the program is that it gives the youth an opportunity to maintain that connection with the land and get to really be out on the land and really focus on keeping that connection alive and you know, some of the mental health aspects of maintaining that. It helps the youth be a bit more grounded in some areas when life's getting a bit faster, and it gives a chance for a bit of reflection time.
We now want to tell you about this week's third web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, do you agree with the Trump administration's decision to reopen the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for oil and gas drilling? Your answers are yes or no. Go to our website at www.aptnnews.ca/polls to have your say. Part 1 of Dennis Ward's interview with Prime Minister Mark Carney is up next. Stay with us. Miigwech for staying with us. St. John's 21, Charlottetown 24. 13 in Cartwright, Happy Valley Goose Bay 23. 24 in St. Jovite, Saskatchewan 22 and sunny there. Toronto partly cloudy and 26, Sault Ste. Marie 14 and sun. Big Trout Lake 18, Sioux Lookout 22. Puckatawagan 20, Thompson, Smoky and 16. 24 in Winnipeg, Barons River 24 as well. Regina 23, Yorkton 23 and sun. Buffalo Narrows 16, La Ronge 18. Rain in Peace River at 20, Fort McMurray 19. 19 in Calgary, Edmonton 21. Bella Coola 18, Campbell River 22. Sand Spit 17, Smithers 23. Beaver Creek 18, Dawson 20. Wrigley 20, Norman Wells 20 in Showers. Palatuck 8, Tuktoyaktuk 7. Baker Lake 9, Chesterfield 9. And Arctic Bay sunny and 7, Aglulik 13 and partly cloudy. Our Dennis Ward was recently in the Northwest Territories where he had a one-on-one interview with Prime Minister Mark Carney in Carney's hometown of Fort Smith. It is the first time APTN National News has sat down with a Prime Minister since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in June of 2016. Here is part 1 of that interview with Dennis and the Prime Minister.
You're doing this for us. It took a while. We were trying to get you before the Liberal leadership, but here we are in your hometown. What's it like to be back?
Well, it's great. It's always great to go home, and pleasure to be in Fort Smith any time of the year. Last time I was here was 2009, I think. It was just after, it was during the financial crisis, and it was probably during March or so. So it was wasn't green like this, but it's great to be back, and we've got a lot on, and that time was a time of crisis, and Canada getting through that. We've got a different set of challenges now that are coming again from outside of our borders, and we've got a lot of options to address it and build out, and that's part of why I'm here.
Well, you made a couple of stops today, one at the community center.
Yep.
I believe her name was Connie, greeted you with a sign saying, "We love you, Mark, but you scrap Bill C-5." Is that something you've been hearing a lot?
No, actually. It was nice of Connie to come out with a sign with a couple of people, but no, I haven't heard a lot, and we spent last week, well, a couple of things. One, last week met with physically over 250 First Nations chiefs, Grand Chiefs.
In particular, after Alberta said
virtually,
they would
there
do their
were
own
more
provincial assessment.
there, another
First
50,
Nation
75,
Summit
I guess,
currently
as
taking
well,
place,
to talk through the beginnings of the
Alberta,
approach going
which is-
forward, what C5 does. And all it does at this stage is it makes things possible. The question is, what do we want to do? What do we want to do together? And we started, the first thing we did in the question of what do we want to do together is meeting with Indigenous leadership. I'm going to, as you know, I'm going to Inuvik later today, and we'll be meeting with all the leadership of Inuit Nunagat, the rights holders, modern treaty leadership, to talk about what's possible. What they want to do. And I think that's the important point. Sometimes you need to create the conditions, and that's what we've done, is to create the conditions for possibilities. And then the question is, what are people for? It's a big country. We've got lots of opportunity, and the question of which of those do we want to pursue?
I guess depending on who you were listening to, the First Nation Summit has been panned a little. Some walked out, the youth couldn't make it in. Some were saying, ministers were the ones doing all the talking. I guess, what is your take on how the summit went?
It went very well. And I will tell you that the number of rights holders, the number of Grand Chiefs that came directly to me with specific proposals that have followed up with us on specific ideas is immense. And again, we're going to focus where people want to do things, where people are for. Understand that and it's true, Dennis, in any time. There are projects that seem good to some people but are bad for others, or projects that aren't ready, or ideas that aren't fully developed. And it's really going to be around what are people really enthusiastic, and what helps to build nations. And when I say, I add the S for a reason. Building, of course, Canada, but building in a new way with First Nations. And this is really the first time we've had a signature piece of federal legislation that has at the heart of it economic growth for Indigenous peoples. And that's the possibility. Now the job for leadership, myself included, but I'm only one of many. The premiers, the leaders of the rights holders, as I say, the modern treaty leaders, to work with what do we want to do.
What in Mark Carney's mind is a major project that this country needs right now?
Well, so I'm going to answer that in a different way, if you don't mind, which is that I don't have a preset notion on a specific project that we must do. But what we did in the legislation is sort of define the elements of, well, what does build a nation? And there's 5 elements, and one of them is, of course, it advances Canada's economic interests. It makes us stronger, makes us more resilient. And we know because of the crisis coming from south of the border, that's one of the things we need to do. But secondly, and crucially, these are projects that are in the interests of Indigenous peoples, that are aligned with their interests. And that shows you what the process has to be, because it has to come up from those groups. And the third big thing, the third big element that is very clearly in the legislation and will be in the approach, is that it aligns with the country's climate goals. so that it's moving us, the projects are moving us forward. Now, not every project will move us forward as much as other projects, but I'll give you an example, and I'm fresh from, as you may know, from meeting with the premiers, the first ministers yesterday, including the premier of the Northwest Territories, who very kindly came from that to be here today. And one of the things we talked about was raised by the premier of BC and the premier of Yukon, is how can they, and that what they want to do is connect the hydro grid, so the zero emission grid from BC into the Yukon. And in doing so, obviously it brings power to homes and people there, and clean power. But what it also does is it creates the possibility to develop critical mineral deposits, to diversify our economy, to give longer term jobs. And there's a series of projects that are linked in there. We're in the Northwest Territories. I'll give another example. Again, doesn't come from us. I'm going to hear about this, I'm sure, from the leaders of Inuit Nunagat tomorrow, which is Grays Bay Point. So this, for those who aren't familiar with it, is in Nunavut, Grays Bay. It is a potential new port, but the key thing about the port is it links and opens up opportunity in Nunavut, but as well in the Northwest Territories for economic development, for links and transportation corridor up into that. It creates the possibility that we build new relationships with Europeans, which provides some diversification from our exposure to the Americans. It's a very exciting project. Now, we will potentially support that, provided it has the full support of the Indigenous peoples all the way along the corridor. It seems to have a lot of support, but we've got to make sure that it's there, provided that we can see the broader economic benefits. We don't want to build a port and nothing flows through it, and that we get some private sector money to make sure that it's not just the Canadian taxpayer that's paying.
And Dennis Ward's full interview with the Prime Minister is on our website at aptnnews.ca. Part 2 of that interview will air on tonight's evening newscast. Tonight at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time is when our French viewers get to enjoy this week's new Nouvelle Nationale. Our host Kim Sullivan joins us now to give us a sneak peek. Tansei, Kim.
Hey, Creason. Always nice to see you on a Friday. Opposition to Bill 97 continues to grow in Quebec, and our cameraman actually traveled north to talk to a group now blocking access to local sawmills. But I have to say, music is at the heart of tonight's show. We meet the creators of Meshtuk Guitars, speak with the organizer of Snuneymuxw Festival. It is a huge festival in a small community, as well as the organizer of Montreal's First Peoples Festival, celebrating its 35th anniversary. 6:30 Eastern tonight.
Thank you, Kim. And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday. We're back again for your evening newscasts in a few hours, including a story about more staged blockades in Quebec regarding the controversial Bill 97. Please join us then. From our HQ in Winnipeg and from our reporting staff from across the country, hi miigwech masicho, thank you for watching. And daytime, we'll see you again next Monday. Ekose.